are dabbling ducks or puddle ducks, typically found in shallower water, marshes, sloughs, shallow lakes, rivers, versus our divers, usually found in deeper lakes. And this all kind of plays into different things that the ducks will eat, different types of food sources. So you might not necessarily find divers, in small little potholes, little creeks and sloughs and things like that. But that's just because of the food sources are different in each of these different locations for water. So some other things to think about. Waterfowl roosts versus loafs versus food sources. So roost, if you're not familiar, waterfowl roost on water, or this is basically where they're going to sleep at night. There's obviously a lot of predation that are easy to pick off waterfowl, so they need body of water to roost on overnight. So this is where they're resting and sleeping. Loafs, this is a place where waterfowl will find daytime rest, where they're going to be digesting food, whether they're eating in the morning or in the evening. Usually at evening time, they'll head back to roost after eating an evening feed. But daytime loaf, just like I said, a place to rest. They're preening feathers, digesting food, things like that. And then food sources. Again, it depends on what type of waterfowl species you're talking about. There are some species will eat more aquatic vegetation and invertebrates in the water versus others. Some of our waterfowl species commonly found across Wisconsin, is such as this nice mallard we have pictured on the slide, are definitely very much generalist when it comes to their diet. So some other things that they may find kind of across the state, like we talked about, aquatic vegetation, aquatic invertebrates, macroinvertebrates, things like that they're eating, different bugs, fishes, things like that, but also agriculture. At Wisconsin is a huge agriculture state. We are very fortunate in that regard. Not to just talk about duck species, but goose species as well. Commonly found feeding in our different agriculture fields across the state of Wisconsin. So all kinds of different food sources, and this just kind of helps play into where we're going to look for these birds when we're scouting virtually. So, and then the last thing that kind of plays into needs of waterfowl is security. Different types of sanctuaries where the birds are going to find safety. So I'm sure you probably have seen it in your local parks. Your different ducks and goose species just hanging out, loafing around during the day. And these are commonly going to be found safe zones for the birds because you're not able to hunt at your local parks, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be at municipal park, things like that. These will kind of change throughout the year as well, as far as different sanctuaries. There are a lot of waterfowl refuges across the state, even on public lands that are open to hunting. Birds can also find sanctuaries and safety in there. This will, of course, change throughout hunting season. May get a little bit deeper into public land, a little bit farther away where they're not getting the hunting pressure. They may find it throughout the summertime because hunting season's not open, but the further and further that hunting season goes on, the further away from public access that those birds might find that safety. So just some things to think about when you're virtually scouting, what you're going to be looking for. And we'll kind of show some different things using these different platforms of what to look for as far as both water and agriculture. Where you're going to find roosts for birds, some just ideas to look at, and then some different food sources. Again, there's all kinds of different agriculture found across the state, so definitely a lot of options there. Different times of year will kind of depend too of what you're looking for. Obviously now us in summertime, all our ag fields are still growing. These birds aren't necessarily feeding in a cornfield right now because that corn is, need to waist high depending on where you're at in the state. The corn hasn't been harvested yet. It hasn't even grown fully yet. So those birds are not feeding on the same food sources now in the middle of summer as they're going to be in the fall versus who they're going to find in the springtime. Same goes for wintertime. Obviously we live, in the northern states with snow. even though the cornfields may be harvested, if it's covered under a foot of snow, there's not a whole lot of food for them to find. So just some things to think about. You may have a fantastic cornfield in October. November may hit, and again, if you have a foot of snow, that's not going to leave a whole lot of food source for the birds. But again, it kind of depends. That might be the best food source that they may have if everything else is, maybe a different type of agriculture or was already fed out, whatever the case may be. So, yeah. Um,
Yeah, Spencer, I can throw some additional comments in there. Other things that
Absolutely.
I like to think about too. I mean, we kind of touch base on it here, but also weather is a big deal depending on what type of species you're trying to target. Like for example, if you're going to be open water hunting, like say on Lake Michigan or Lake Winnebago or things along those lines, checking to see how strong the wind is and where it's coming out of, because those birds will adjust where they're going to be. And it's, you don't think about it on a lake, that's 10 miles wide or 30 miles wide or 60 miles wide, but they're going to go to the lee side so they're not having to fight the wind. And so if you're looking at trying to set up one for safety, but also you're looking at where are the birds actually going to pile up and be at. Or again, if it's a very windy day that it's going to be and you're in the marsh, making sure that you're set down in a quiet spot where the birds are going to want to be. Or if it's going to be a foggy day or a cloudy day, or as you kind of pointed out with regard to weather and cold conditions. Again, we haven't had really too harsh of a winter here the last handful of years, but again, when things do freeze up, the most of our birds, we need snow. If there's snow, that will push the birds further south. But if we don't have a lot of snow, our mallards, our Canada geese, all of our diving ducks, unless everything freezes up, they're still going to stick around, and we got satellite telemetry data to kind of look at that. And so, yeah, I think just making comment on that, and then as you pointed out with the security, I think behavior is a big one in that these birds become educated rapidly, and so what may have been a good scouting technique in late September is definitely going to change by the end of October, because those birds have, been educated, they've been shot at, and now they're going to behave differently than what they were at the beginning of the season. And making sure that you kind of adjust your scouting tactics or your willingness to maybe make the extra trek a mile in to find those birds.
Yeah, a lot of good points there, Taylor. Could you expand on that telemetry that you were just kind of referring to?
Yeah, yep. We put over 150 backpack transmitters on hen mallards from 2021 to 2024, and we kind of looked at how these birds moved. And we looked at genetics to see, if there was any, crossbreeding essentially with released captive reared mallards to see if their behavior was different, and also looking at just again where do these birds go and how does that associate with our winters. And so if you recall 2021 through 2024, we were pretty mild, and I think we found of those hen mallards that had made at least one full fall, made it through one entire hunting season through the winter, almost 80% of them never left the state. And so again, just we think a lot of the times that these birds are, hey, they're going down to Arkansas, or they're going to go down to Missouri, or they're going to go down to Louisiana. But unless we get conditions that force them out of there, the birds are going to not take on the extra energy to migrate and move when they don't have to. And that's absolutely what we found.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And just to, I guess, kind of expand on what Taylor's talking about. So, talking about these GPS backpacks that are actually fitted onto the birds, and we are not experiencing the same migration necessarily that you might have seen 20 years ago if you've been hunting that long, where we used to have a lot different winters than we're seeing as of recent. Like we were Taylor saying, the birds don't have to migrate south because they have all of these basic necessities here within the state. So why travel 1,000 miles south if I have everything I need here in Wisconsin, that I don't have to go anywhere? So yeah, just some things to think about. So yeah, very interesting topic for sure.
I'll also add, I mean, in terms of talking about food sources, like for example, we've seen an exponential increase in overuse of diving ducks and sea ducks on the Great Lakes since zebra and quagga mussels became, they're a problem. We call them an invasive species, and they cause issues with boats and pipes and things along those lines, and have issues with, native mussels and our native fish population. However, for waterfowl, it's not a great food resource, but it's an unlimited food resource. And so, again, when you're looking at potential opportunities, we've seen that just explode over the last 15 years since we've had zebra and quagga mussels, because those birds will not leave unless they're forced to, because the Great Lakes are froze. And so, again, just one of those other things that folks don't typically think about.
Yeah, very good point. And yeah, for me, I'm not that special niche of open water hunter myself, but I have done it in the past. And yeah, it's really cool that we are very fortunate in the state of Wisconsin that we have all kinds of different diversity, and we see many, many different species just throughout the state. That there's all kinds of different habitats for all these different species. So cool. So now we kind of know what we're looking for. Just kind of wanted to touch briefly on that basic biology, which kind of shapes into what we're looking for when we're virtually scouting for these birds. And we'll talk about at the end as well. You may have great plan, on your map, but of course, it always plays into putting boots on the ground, and I'll talk about that kind of at the end. But um, just wanted to talk about some different hunting opportunities, some different things to look for throughout the state. So again, we're very, very fortunate. Wisconsin has all kinds of public land opportunities, both public land and private land that are open to the public. So between state-owned lands, there's different county-owned lands. Again, private land with public access, voluntary public access, which is kind of a program through the state. All kinds of lakes and rivers. Again, 15,000 lakes throughout the state, many of which are typically public access, have some sort of public access. Not necessarily meaning that you have an opportunity to hunt on all 15,000 lakes. If they are public, especially here in the southeast where I'm from, a lot of lakes are quite inhabited by homes throughout the lakes. So you might not have legal opportunity to get far enough away to legally hunt that lake, but different rivers as well, all kinds of opportunities. We do have some federal hunting opportunities across the state as well. Some of you probably are familiar with Horicon Marsh. Has both state and federal lands across Horicon Marsh. Some other things just that I wanted to touch base on, just some things that I'm familiar with here in the Southeast, and others presenting, you guys can chime in about some other private lands, but a big example is the Nature Conservancy. It has all kinds it's a private organization, but it has public hunting opportunities. And then even here in the Southeast, there's the Kettle Moraine Land Trust. Not a whole lot of waterfowl hunting opportunities, but again, just a private organization that has acquired property through various grants that basically requires them to open up public hunting on their property. So all kinds of different opportunities. And I guess I just wanted to show some of these different opportunities as well before we dive into OnX, just to kind of show the different options and what everything looks like. So this is our DNR website where you can find public land access, whether it be state fisheries areas, state forests, state wildlife areas, state parks, state natural areas. You'll have to check on regulations depending on which property you're looking to access. But there are all kinds of different opportunities out there. State wildlife areas are usually the most common found for different hunting opportunities. That's not to say that you cannot hunt state natural areas or state parks or state forests. Many of these do have hunting opportunities as well. But again, you have to check your regulations just to see what is open and available for you to hunt at. So looking at this public access lands maps, you have these tabs kind of preloaded. So this is a free tool through the DNR where you can utilize to virtually scout for different places to hunt. There's all kinds of different layers where you can choose on to find recreational opportunities. So whether you're looking for voluntary public access, you want full public access, you can turn on different deer management units. Obviously, we're talking about waterfowl today. So I kind of already have a lot of these preset just to kind of show different options. Obviously, we're looking for public land. If you're looking for full public, you're looking for stewardship funded properties. So like you're probably familiar with Doles Nelson, DNR managed lands. And the nice thing that I like about this, and Bryce, you're probably familiar, I don't know if OnX ever did this, but I can change the transparency. So right now, a lot of these, and it's kind of hard to see because I'm pretty zoomed out, but I can actually change the transparency on these so I can actually look in better on that specific property depending on where I'm looking at. But this is a great, fantastic free resource that is relatively user friendly just to find different properties. So if I am to zoom in, you can see there's different colors highlighted just kind of across these different properties. So like a lot of these green ones, a little hard to see some of these. I think this is a turkey hunting access program, these properties here. Some of these yellow ones are typically voluntary public access, which are privately owned, but open to us as the public, which is kind of a nice program. And then if I am to zoom in a little farther, you can kind of see the boundaries of this property. So everything that's in that green. If I go back to my legend, I can kind of view and see what areas are open, what areas are closed. So typically like this crosshatch, that's usually a closed area, whether it's no public access or it could be a wildlife refuge, things like that, where you're not able to hunt on that property. It's nice because this highlights all the parking areas, all these Ps that you see located throughout the map. That tells you where parking areas are established. So there's parking lots to park at. And again, do a little research depending on the property. So this is a wildlife area and a natural area for this property specifically. If you were to be looking at a state park, there may be fees associated with that, or state forests. Some of the parking lots may actually charge. So just be aware when you're traveling to these different areas to make sure that you follow all signs. Our maps are usually pretty up to date. The state does both purchase and sell lands from time to time, so things may be a little different than what you're seeing on the map. I'm not sure exactly how frequently these are updated. I know OnX, I have seen OnX be off from time to time, so make sure you're always following whatever signs you're seeing on that property. So very important to remember that. So some other things I just wanted to note out. So our voluntary public access. So this is a program where private landowners are able to enroll their private land to allow people public access. So not a ton of properties throughout the state, but here it's kind of listed through different regions, and then it lists those in specific counties. So kind of look through and find a specific county that you're looking to recreate in. And again, make sure you're following signs for these. Sometimes they may have certain dates that you're able to access it. I know a lot of properties around here in the Southeast are typically agricultural properties. So you're not able to access them on such and such dates because they don't want anyone disturbing the agriculture. So again, great resource to have, always something to look into. If you don't know where to start and you're looking for wildlife areas, you can search by county. So you can see here, just for an instance, I just pulled up Jefferson County. So we were just looking at Jefferson Marsh. You can type in whatever county across the state that you're looking for. This is a really nice resource that can kind of help funnel it down, because if you're looking at a statewide map, it might be a little daunting and gosh, where do I start? So just know that that's a good resource to have. So again, we're very fortunate here in the Southeast. There's all kinds of great public land areas for waterfowl hunting. So
Spencer, I'll also make a comment for folks that aren't aware. Wisconsin is unique in that we have the public trust doctrine, which essentially says all water that is publicly accessible, that you can essentially float a stick down, that has an inflow and outflow, is public water. So again, 99% of the water in the state of Wisconsin technically is public. For example, we get this all the time, is we get a lot of complaints from people that, hey, I got some yahoos hunting on my pond on my property, it's got to be illegal. And it's like, well, if they kept their feet wet and walked up the creek and set up in your pond, they're absolutely legal to do so. However, if they were to shoot a bird and it were to fall on the land, they couldn't retrieve it because that would be trespassing. And so again, there's one of those other considerations to think about in terms of, I mean, almost all the water's public, but you have to consider, one, are you doing a good thing here? Like, are you giving waterfowl hunters a good name by trying to sneak in and hunt on this without talking to anybody or telling anybody? And you leave a situation or a scenario where you're potentially not being able to retrieve your birds and those types of things. But Wisconsin is unique in that almost all the water in the state is publicly accessible.
Yeah, that's a great point. So again, 15,000 lakes and rivers and, all kinds of marshes and sloughs and things like that. There are plenty of opportunities. Something that Taylor didn't mention is just to keep an account. Again, if your feet are wet, you're likely legal. You have legal hunting opportunities there. Just keep in mind to keep distance from occupied dwellings. So 100 yards from any occupied dwelling as per state law for discharge of firearms, that is. So just keep that in mind. So and Taylor brings up a great point as far as ethics goes. You may encounter, unhappy landowners that are going to try to kick you off of public land. I've had it happen to myself a number of times. Just use your best judgment as far as those ethics that come into play. You might legally be allowed to hunt in a certain spot, but like Taylor was mentioning, if you are to harvest a bird, is that going to land on landowner's property where you're unable to retrieve it? That's obviously not very good ethics. So, yeah, very good point there. Uh, Another little search engine through our DNR website. You can search for any different type of properties throughout the state using this tool. So it depends on what type of activity you're looking to do. So you can use this, obviously, past hunting. I'm just looking for hunting properties. And when I pull up any of these specific ones, so like we were looking at Jefferson Marsh on the interactive map, if I am to pull up Jefferson Marsh, there's additional information on here. And then under this maps, I can actually download a map if I'd like. If you want to save it on your phone, save it on your computer, whatever it may be, where this is not interactive. And you can see there's no topographic map with this. So it's a little bit harder, but kind of a nice resource that I like to have actual hard copy from time to time just to kind of look at the property and kind of compare it to that interactive with that topographic map. So nice little thing to use. And then if I am to click on this interactive map, that brings me to that same lands map that we were looking at earlier, which I think I already closed out. So I gotta move my tabs around. So again, you can search kind of wherever. You can search different distances from different cities. Usually this just kind of lists the big cities across the states and even some out of state as well, between Chicago and St. Paul, things like that. So, or you can just search by county. So it'll list all the different activities as well, between bird watching, canoeing, hiking, skiing, fishing, hunting, and then again, you can cross-reference all you want on here, but all right. I think that was all I was going to mention on that. So we'll move on to OnX. I'll have Bryce take over here in just a minute. He is our GIS expert, who is a wizard when it comes to anything and everything on OnX. He's very familiar with it. Just wanted to talk about some little things that Bryce is kind of going to show. So we kind of talked about the different types of properties between state-owned, federal land, government land, private land, things like that, which you can all find on OnX. OnX is a private company. It's a great resource to use just for hunting different states. So they offer different programs, different packages that you can purchase. So whether you're looking to only hunt Wisconsin, you can buy a plan just for the state of Wisconsin. If you want to hunt other states, obviously there's additional charges there. So like for me, myself, I hunt a number of different states. I actually have a plan for all 50 states. It usually works better for me rather than buying like 5 or 6 different states. But There's all kinds of different tools in there, which Bryce will kind of dive into a little bit. Different tools to add waypoints to mark certain spots. And again, you can organize this however you'd like. For me, if I'm virtually scouting, I like to mark just waypoints on properties that look interesting to me that I want to go check out and scout in person. And another tool that I really like to use, there's a tracking tool that you can use that actually follows you. So if you have a smartphone, it's really nice to use. If I am scouting in person, I find a location, I walk in during daytime, like a day before I'm going to hunt, and then I can set a track on my track out. Is really, really, really nice to use because when I'm going at 4 o'clock that next morning, trying to find my way in the dark can be next to impossible. If I'm not familiar with the property, it's going to look way different at night than it is going to be in the daytime. So this is a really, really nice thing to use on your phone. So just something to think about. But yeah, I'll stop sharing and pass it over to Bryce, and we can open OnX.
So right now I have an area pulled up in northern Wisconsin. And kind of what we're going to do and what I like to do when I first find a property is just get a layout of everything surrounding it. So what we're looking for is those three major things, which is access, food, and shelter. What pops out to me is this area up here. And again, this is coming from somebody who just learned how to duck hunt. But what I'm going to focus on typically is differences in color as far as different landscapes. So different vegetation types. The hardwoods up here, you get what I'm assuming is probably lowland or wetland leading into the river here. And using some of these layers, the first one that you're going to want to have on, there's two. So government lands is going to show you public. So that's state owned, federally owned, and I think there's one other layer in there as well.
I know it does county. County as well.
County. So that's the first major one. And this is mostly going to be your areas that you're able to access without any special rules. With one caveat being, it will show you restricted access or state lands that have special rules. Since we're in the Mead Wildlife area, they actually do have certain rules with this piece. And OnX is pretty good at listing links to these areas to show you what these rules are. So once I click on it, I'm going to scroll down, and you can do all this on your phone as well. You're going to hit the visit website tab, which will bring you to that link that Spencer was just showing you with Jefferson Marsh. And if you scroll down and read through what it says, you can actually find their rules here. And for the Mead Wildlife area, they have special rules pertaining to waterfowl specifically. So waterfowl hunting will be closed at 1 p.m. each day, beginning the Monday following opening weekend of the Northern Waterfowl Zone and lasting for 16 full days after that. And this is specific to this area. So that is one of the nicer things about OnX is that they will clearly show with their symbology that this area is not like other ones. Whereas if I were to zoom out and go to a neighboring one in Dewey Marsh, this one has no restrictions on it. Well, as far as special rules for this piece. The other layer I have on, where you're seeing a lot of these orange highlights, are going to be private lands. And this is a good way of figuring out if you're too close to somebody's property boundaries. And this is mostly when it comes to like big game hunting, but it can still be useful when it comes to waterfowl, especially when it comes to access and where you're going to park. So from here, we're going to start trying to narrow down areas where we're looking to hunt. And if I need to slow down, somebody please tell me. So what I'm going to start, what's that?
Doing good so far, Bryce.
All right. So what I'm going to do is start panning around roads, and this is just going to be looking for different areas to park. As we can see, like this whole area over here is all private, but what's nice is OnX has other layers that we can use to our advantage. One of them being U.S. crop distribution. So what this is going to show us is what these fields are planted, or what's planted in these fields at certain times. Now, given crop rotation and things like that, some of this can be off, but we have other ways of looking at that too. So over here, alfalfa fields, grain, hay, soybeans, things like that are surrounding this marsh area. And to me, that sounds like extra food sources and some of those areas between roosting and water where they could hang out. So I'm going to start looking in this area for access. And one of the tricks with this is there's kind of a rule. There are no such thing as straight lines typically when it comes to like nature. So as I'm panning around, I'm going to start looking for areas that look disturbed and where people have been. And the one that's going to pop out to me is this area right here. So here we go. That right here looks like a parking lot. And that's just using this one tool. Now, Spencer brought up a good tool that we can also use, which is the DNR's website. And as soon as I can move this out of the way, what we can do is actually zoom into the same area and see if there's a parking lot. And they, according to this map, there is one. And the other thing we can do, where let's say that parking icon wasn't there, but we really wanted to make sure. If you click on this, what's going to happen is it's going to bring up that same window that gives you the detail of this property, but it's also going to give you coordinates on that way on the spot that you clicked. So all you're going to do is copy it, go to Google Maps, and paste those coordinates in, and it's going to drop a pin there. And if you're lucky, which this time we're not, but just drop the street view. And if you get really lucky with this, somebody will have drove up to that area, took pictures, and it'll be here on Google. Unfortunately, this time they didn't, but we can't see that a road leads here. So if you're in the area and you were pre-scouting, like day before, week before, you could actually drive up this road and see if there's a parking lot there. From what I remember, having gone to school in this area, I am almost positive there is a parking spot here. And these pictures are from 23.
There's an indicator right there, kind of in the corner too, where you can see the state-owned signs.
Yep.
You know, so just using your other resources, like Bryce said, just to do the Google Street View, Google Maps, you know, can get you pretty close, so you kind of know what you're looking for. And then too, just getting directions to the spot. Like I know for me, I use Google Maps pretty much exclusively just for directions. That is really nice, rather than trying to follow OnX on your phone. Now we're pretty fortunate, you know, that we get OnX on Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, things like that, where you can kind of get directions through OnX. But yeah, good tips for sure, just to add those different resources to help you be more effective.
Yeah, for sure. So from here, since we have a good idea of where we could park, this is when we have to start using more of our skills as far as biology goes and looking for what these birds need and kind of how we're going to get there. I guess for me, I would probably start just walking into some of these channels and not wading through them, because I'm sure some of these are pretty bottomless, but there are other ways of doing this, canoes, things like that. Or if that's not really what you're looking for, you just, again, start looking for more areas that are probably easier to access. One of which being a boat launch, which, again, OnX is sometimes reliable, sometimes not. They're not always marked as this clearly. Sometimes they just don't put the symbols on those areas for some reason, but that's just where Google comes in. So some of the other layers that you can use to help you out are the possible access layers. So these are going to show a lot of the voluntary public access points that Spencer was touching on before. I believe this is another layer that it's useful to get a general idea if something's open. However, these can change, and OnX isn't always on top of it when it comes to changeover on it. So one of the examples I had was over here. So when I click on the area, it's going to show a lot of the details, just like the other ones, only you'll notice that there's these green hash marks, and that usually represents a VPA of some sort or some kind of access. And
You zoom in a little bit more, Bryce. It's kind of hard
Yeah.
to see the hash marks there.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if this one isn't right because it's not popping
I see
up
the
now.
property to the left has got the hash on it.
Yeah. I had these open before and now they're not wanting to cooperate. So, well, what we're going to do then is find a different one because there are others around. One of which is down to the south here. It can get pretty busy if you leave these layers on, by the way. So if you're going to be searching around, especially on your computer, make sure to turn them off. This can get pretty hectic when you're trying to find a place and you have multiple layers on. So this is another one here. It is fading in and out, and this is one of the problems that I think Spencer actually brought up is that you can't change the transparency on these layers. Whereas the DNR one you can. So what we're going to do is, since we're unable to tell what's going on, but we're kind of curious if this is accessible, is we're going to go to the DNR map. Oh, all right. Not how you do it. This is actually one of the maps that I haven't used. So this is, I'm kind of learning on the fly here, but
Wow, I feel special now.
yeah, I kind of relied too much on OnX a little bit, but
OnX is certainly way more user friendly, and
yeah,
I don't know if the Nature Conservancy will show here on the DNR website since it is private,
right.
but I think I just saw a Waukesha Conservancy on there as well, so it might.
It might. Well, for now, we're gonna just kind of skip over that one. Some of the layers are finicky on PCs. Also, they don't load all the time, so there are times where you're gonna have to switch it on and off to actually get it to pop up. And once you do, then it should run smoothly. Right now, I know there are some in this area, and it is not wanting to pop up for me. So I am guessing I might have had too many layers on, but still, we're gonna go back up to Mead Wildlife Area and start looking at some of these spots here where we can start putting in pins. So this window here is all your tools that you're going to use, and when you place a pin, it'll use wherever you clicked last or whatever's in the center of your screen. I suggest when you do this, click somewhere first, then hit add waypoint, or just drag it. It's a lot easier on your phone because it will actually let you just use your thumb to press it or to place it instead of having to drag and drop. And from here, we can actually just change the waypoint name. So we're just going to call this the flowage. And from here, we can actually just change and type it. We can actually type in whatever icon we want to use. So here, we'll probably just use what was that?
I say this is a really good idea just to help organize. And when you're, say, if you're putting a bunch of different waypoints in a certain spot, like, in October, you're going to go up to George Meade and you want to have some spots lined up, just to kind of mark. However you organize it is kind of up to you. So you can see there's all kinds of different icons. If this, is going to be a potential duck spot for you, or maybe there's geese there, or, maybe, that's a spot to avoid, whatever that pin is for. You can change the colors of it, things like that. So like for me, for instance, I use kind of a different color organization where, yellow is a maybe, green for me is usually like good to go. Red maybe something to avoid. Like Bryce just labeled it as a point of interest. So just kind of think about these things. It can be very much helpful to organize your pins in such a manner, because if you have hundreds of different waypoints laid out across the state, across property, wherever it may be, it can get really confusing if they're all red and they're all just X's, because you're like, oh, what did I mark this spot for 2 years ago? I don't remember. So
yeah, and there's also an area down here where you can add photos and notes to this, and the notes section is actually pretty helpful for things like what Spencer was just saying, where you place these pins at work 2 months prior to season, and you sat there all day placing pins and completely forgot about why you put them there. So a lot of times I'll throw little notes in here, especially during like the off season for deer, where there's pinch points that I want to look at, and I have an idea in my head of what's going to happen. So I'll write that out. Pretty much whatever it is, like, oh, the wind could be good. That if there's a southwest wind, this would be a good spot, or things like that, or like for ducks, especially playing the wind, this would be helpful. So all I'm going to do is make sure that this is filled out how I want. A good way to remember things is color coding it, like Spencer said. For me, I use white if I haven't been there yet and I still need to go on foot and check. So from here, just gonna save it. And a good thing to do to keep this organized is add these to a folder. As you can see, I have a bunch of different folders for different things. And for this, I'm just going to say duck hunting.
I cannot stress this enough to have the folders. Bryce is way better at this than I am. All mine are just not in folders. So I have 200 some pins between waterfowl points, duck and goose hunting spots, turkey spots, deer spots, other things that I'm looking for. It's just a cluster, and it is so chaotic to turn things on or off. If I only want to look at my duck hunting spots, Bryce has it organized very nicely where you can just open that folder and turn duck spots on, or deer hunting spots, or turkey hunting spots, whatever it may be. So one more thing I was going to point out. So like in that little note section, I actually kind of use a little cheat code. So instead of punching in notes, I will actually use the title as my notes. So if this is, instead of flowage, I'll put in, check out this spot for south wind or whatever it may be. Or say if I'm scouting in person and I see a bunch of ducks there, I can put down, saw 200 mallards on, such and such date. So that way, instead of having to pull it up, I can actually just see when I click on that waypoint of what my note might be. So it's just kind of my little hack, but sometimes you may want to add more than just a simple little note like that. So just something to think about.
I'll highlight personally for me using OnX and for notes is, say if I'm going to be goose hunting and I've talked to some private landowners, and you go ahead of time and sit down, have a conversation, get on the porch and talk to them, and if they're interested in letting you come on there to duck hunt or goose hunt, that is where like you become interested in them, not just their land. And so for me, I keep notes like, oh yeah, their wife is a school teacher, or they work for 30 years at this company, or those types of things, so that if you were to go back there the next year, you'd be like, oh, how's is your wife still teaching third grade, or those types of notes, or things along the lines that they're like, hey, this person was invested in the discussion that they had with me. And I tend to find that that is a good place for me to keep those thoughts, because it does pay dividends if you go back.
Yeah, those are all like great ways of keeping track of the places that you're going to be looking at hunting, especially with like what Taylor just said. Making sure you have notes on like property owners and things like that. I know I do it with places up north for deer and things like that, where if we talk to them in the bar during the summer and they're saying what they're going to plant and food plots and stuff, and they're adjacent to public, well, I know like if the deer are going to be there or if they're not. And it could be the same thing with ducks, like we were talking about earlier. Using that crop layer, if you happen to know some of the farmers in the area and that they're going to be doing a crop rotation, and they're not going to be planting one field with corn, it's going to be switching over to soybeans, or they're going to leave it, whatever they choose to do. And you just can keep a note of that for later. That could help you out down the line during the season. And then you're not running around trying to figure out like, oh, everything changed, and now I gotta go to my plan B or C spot. It could save you a lot of time. So from here, since we have a point of interest and we can start looking at ways of approaching it, one thing to remember is that OnX is pretty detailed with the different base maps you can use. You're not strictly like stuck using like a 2D map. You could make this 3D. I can tell you it's Wisconsin, so it's not going to be very interesting to look at in 3D without adjusting this exaggeration. And even then, it does not like when you mess with it too much. But if you exaggerate your 3D, it'll pretty much take any topography and do exactly what it says. It's going to exaggerate this. So any small hill is now going to look like a mountain. And you can use that to your advantage, especially when it comes to access and depending on what you're bringing with you, whether it's a giant bag full of waders and decoys, like your dog, anything like that. This is going to help out a lot. And that's right here in this tab for the base maps. And all I did was click the 3D view and adjust this elevation. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because since we have a spot picked, what we're going to start doing is trying to make this or come up with a game plan of how we're going to hunt it. And like I said, OnX sometimes struggles with switching things over on PC. So we want to find a way to get here and hunt this. Our original area down here, which I'm going to mark with a waypoint, is kind of a far walk. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't feel like walking this far with decoys and waders on my back and my dog through this kind of marsh. So what we're going to do is mark the parking lot just so we know it's there. Throw that in our folder. And from here, we're going to try to find a spot that we can actually float this if we can. So if we have a boat or canoe, anything like that, I'm seeing boat launches all along here. Now, the problem is there's this big spot here that says it's a closed area. And to me, that it's just going to be one of those things where you're just not allowed to hunt in it. So we have to try to dodge this and not break any rules. Like Taylor said, you don't want to give duck hunters a bad name. And there are smart ways of going about this, and this would be more of a time to talk to a warden about what would be a good idea or a good way of going about this, whether it be walking the canoe over to the side, casing your gun and unloading, um, things of that nature, um, or
Definitely a
trying.
good check. I've used properties like this just because it says no hunting doesn't necessarily mean that there's no access. Where you may be able to go through there if you're not physically hunting. Obviously, it's going to kind of depend on law enforcement as far as your intent. So definitely best to check with law enforcement just to see and double check with regulations. If maybe you're allowed to float through here, even though it is a closed area, it says, just through OnX, no waterfowl hunting. But maybe it could be no public access at all. So always double check.
I'll also say if you don't necessarily feel comfortable with, you wanting to call the warden, or I would don't hesitate to try to reach out to the biologist that manages this property, because again, one, they're going to have an idea of, oh, is this pool on a drawdown this year, or is it full pool? Do a lot of people hunt this spot? There's a lot of information that you can access from the property managers themselves that will help you, rather than showing up the day of and being like, well, I hope this is going to work. And so sometimes our wardens don't necessarily know all the ins and outs of what's going on the property, or where the boundaries are, or where it's marked. They're, hey, is this legal or is this illegal? Whereas the property manager themselves also are good sources, because this is what they do. This is their property.
Yeah, yeah. And again, this I'm using this as an example because it is a more complicated area. It's not so straightforward, but it is something that you run into, especially on public lands surrounding waterfowl. Having just learned how to waterfowl hunt, it seems like there are a lot more rules to this than there are for, let's say, deer hunting or rabbit or anything like that. So this is stuff that you want to watch out for, especially these closed areas. They do pop up um, in most areas of the state. There's always one or two around that you definitely need to keep your eye out for. So instead of, let's say this is one of your first times going out and you can't get a hold of somebody, or you don't feel comfortable, what we're going to do then is instead we're going to go from this launch, and let's say we're going to just float down into these little back sloughs and things like that, trying to find wood ducks. To me, this is prime wood duck habitat with the different trees and things that I'm seeing from a satellite. There's a lot of different coloration in here, which tells me it's not just one type of tree. If you get into a lot of like places up north that have a lot of popple trees, it all looks the same from an aerial. Well, in here, you can tell that there's different vegetation types in the area, and the biodiversity usually is a better sign for any kind of hunting. Uh, so from here, we're going to mark a bolt launch, which OnX was nice enough to show us on their map instead of us having to find it. So we're going to that in here and change the color to white, and then add it to our duck hunting folder. So from here, we can actually come up with a plan. And let's say you get there the next day or the day before, sorry. It looks like a good plan. You actually see ducks there. And you see that these areas are planted exactly how they're said they are on OnX. So you're just going to add some waypoints. At least I do. I map everything I can when it comes to food. So I just take that, drag it over, I'm going to put that as green just because I know, because I had visual confirmation. And this is one of those times where you could either do it Spencer's way, where we're just going to put alfalfa in the title, or you can put it down in your notes and pretty much say, I don't know how much is there, or if you do have information on your crop rotations, things like that. That would be something to put into your notes. So you're going to put that in here, add it to the folder, and this is again very small scale. But so far we have a point of interest, an access point, food, and this whole area is their shelter. So how you're going to want to hunt this then would be, for me, I would be looking for an area between the food and shelter, and as a cutoff point. So using some of these different layers, you can see kind of what is around in here as far as different tree types. You can use the deciduous versus coniferous, which in this case isn't very helpful for us, but they do have different layers as far as tree types if you need to use that, especially when it comes to wood ducks. This would be something that you could use. But this is when I would start placing points to actually set up. So back in here, you could get a boat in. You could set up over in
a
this
little harder
back
to
piece.
distinguish too. So there's actually a lot more water here where Bryce is looking than meets the eye. So obviously the dark is pretty easy to distinguish as what is water, but all that really light green colored stuff, it's vegetation on the water. So there's all kinds of water in and throughout there. So
Yeah, and this is not something that you would want to wade in. At least from what I can tell. This would be strictly like a boat hunt. This would not be something that I'd say to, I don't know, go and wade out in the water and sit up against a tree like you see on Meat Eater or whatever when they're out in Arkansas hunting flooded timber. This is very much like just strictly boat hunt for this piece.
there's no exact way to, I guess, necessarily tell. Like obviously lakes and stuff may have have depth maps online where you're able to actually see some of that. Just looking on an aerial view like this, like obviously like this water looks rather dark. Shallower water, you know, if it's only like a foot or two deep, is going to have just kind of a different appearance. There may be emergent vegetation, or even if it's open water, it's just going to be a lighter color in general. So that's just kind of something, little tip to look out for. You know, like another thing, running right through this middle of this big chunk of water, we have a river. Rivers usually being a bit deeper. So even if that was shallow on either side of the river, you're likely not going to be able to cross that via foot unless you want to go for a swim. So something to think about.
Exactly. And a lot of this is going to come down to trial and error. You know, you will start to learn kind of what these areas look like the more that you e-scout and then go and set foot on the spot. I know for me, I learned a lot with planning trips out west where something didn't look nearly as big or the hike didn't look nearly as far until I got there and then realized that, oh, it's a lot further, or that incline was a lot steeper than I thought it was, even using OnX, Google Earth, things like that. So when it comes to water depth or thickness of vegetation, or just even hiking through some of these wetlands, like it may look flat like this. If you didn't know, this looks like an open field. But if you really zoom in and you start looking at all these little braids through here, that's just marsh grass, and it sucks to walk through. But that could also be in your favor if you do know how to navigate this and you know what you're doing, you can do it safely. This may deter other people. This could get you a spot that nobody's going to want to deal with and give you an opportunity that like you won't be bothered with having other people around you, and you could have a pretty good hunt by yourself or with your group, and not have to deal with other hunters. Just there are certain little things that you'll end up looking at that may be a physical deterrence for other people. And it's a good way to really find some spots of for your own, for yourself or for your group that otherwise would probably get overlooked. Um, so
Yeah, I think it's just important to realize that, virtual scouting is a starting point, in terms of this is where I'm going to identify, a suite of options. And then, yeah, you're going to have to eventually go out there and see what it looks like. I mean, I know one of the comments on here is like looking for different species, and it's one of those ones where, yeah, hey, yeah, we think this looks like a wood duck spot, or this is more timbery than it is marsh. But ultimately, when you get out there, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, this is right adjacent to the huge wide open part of the marsh. I'm probably gonna see mallards and teal here. Versus, oh yeah, I'm pretty thick here in the woods. I'm just gonna see wood ducks or hooded mergansers or things along those lines. And so, like I said, I think it's important for us to recognize the what you can and can't do, and try not to, because if you just virtually scout and show up here at the Mead Wildlife Area, if you want to get out there, you're going to be showing up at 1 o'clock in the morning to try to find your hunting spot. It's going to be a mess. So again, just use this as a tool to do additional scouting, but kind of lay your plan so you can do some follow up in person stuff.
Yeah, definitely a really good point, Taylor. That was kind of sort of addressing one of the questions in chat. Joshua was kind of asking as far as what we're looking for different species. Like Taylor kind of touched on, so a lot of our species, as far as ducks, are going to be sort of lumped together with our puddle ducks, or dabbling ducks, whatever you want to call them. That they're going to be mostly found in the same type of habitat overall. He kind of mentioned, several others like wood ducks, which is definitely very common across the state. Wood ducks often found in timbers and tighter cover rather than open water, like Taylor was just referring to. So unfortunately, there's no like exact specific answer that look for this type of water for mallards, this type of water for teal. It kind of gets divided, like I was talking earlier, between our puddle ducks and our diving ducks. And again, it's kind of hard to tell when we're just looking at this aerial map. I mean, how deep is it there in this pool that Bryce had marked? Is it 3 feet deep or is it 18 feet deep? And that'll kind of sort of play out to what type of species you are commonly going to find there. That's not to say that you might not find, a diving species in, a little bit shallower body of water, versus a dabbling duck in deeper water. You certainly can see either of those, but it's just kind of where you're commonly going to find them, depending on what type of criteria that we were talking about earlier, those three things that the waterfowl are going to need. So, sometimes you'll see some very crazy species across the state as well. Things that blow in from different flyways is, nothing's impossible, but just like Taylor said, this kind of gives you a jumping off point, because having to scout in person is absolutely crucial. This just kind of gives you that jumping off point just to know what to look for and some ideas to check out. I would highly suggest making more than just one game plan, especially for public land. You might have some great spots to look at, but I would have a backup on your backup, and a backup on your backup. The more points you have, especially with public land, somebody may already be there, maybe too far, maybe your boat breaks down, whatever the reason may be, weather changes. Have multiple plans ready to go. The more points you scout, the better, just to have other ideas, some things that may change morning of. So,
Yeah, for public land, again, I can't emphasize enough. Then, if this is the first time you're going to do it, reach out to the property manager, because again, for the Mead Wildlife Area, they're going to be like, "Oh, you want to hunt, this area? All right, well, unless you are like, if it's opening day, you're going to be there with 20 other people at midnight trying to get out there in that spot." And so it's like, oh, okay, well, what's my backup? What about that? And so they'll give you some guidance or some ideas to be like, all right, yeah, if you're willing to kayak or canoe a mile and a half in this direction, there'll be, considerably fewer hunters than if you all try to put in at this one location. And so, again, utilize those resources.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of this is going to come down to getting out there and actually looking at a lot of this. I use this like in my free time when I know I can't make it somewhere to actually scout, but I'm never going to 100% rely on this. Because even though it is pretty up to date and there are a lot of tools for you to use, there's always going to be something that you looked over or you didn't really think of in the moment, or it's just uh it looks completely different on the ground. That happens all the time, no matter what you're hunting. And yeah, this is just one tool to use. Um, and so from here, I guess Spencer, the only thing I can think of really to that you could use as far as the duck hunting side of things is this wind calendar. So this is one of the new tools that has been added recently where you can set optimal winds for different stands, and they've had this in the past, but now with the live weather tracking, it'll actually show you if it's a good wind or not. So let's say an optimal wind for this is out of the northwest, um, because ducks will be wanting to fly into the food here out of this area, and this is just me guessing, but you could apply, let's say, any wind out of the northwest, west, this area here would be optimal for it. You're going to hit apply. And what's going to happen is if the wind is decent, it's going to tell you if it's a good wind or a bad wind. So just to show you the opposite of this, what it'll look like is, let's say we wanted the wind out of the southeast wind. You had a bunch of different stands or different areas that you wanted to hunt. You wake up in the morning, you've done your due diligence, you've went out and set foot on the ground on all of these different areas, and they're all within a block. Um, and you can see all of them on the screen. What you can do is if you have them all set up, over, yeah. So if you turn that layer on, what it's going to do is just give you this little pop up, and it'll be highlighted red, yellow, or green. And it's a good way of doing a quick check to see, is it worth going, the half hour to one spot, but the plan B spot is, an hour away, but the wind is way better. And this is where it's going to come down to you making decisions based off of experience. Um, doesn't mean rely on it completely. And with duck hunting, I don't know how big of a role that could play, but it is something to keep in mind, especially if you're having to travel to different spots. There's these little things that you can do to make your life easier with like OnX or Go Hunt or whatever app you want to use. Even just having a weather app of like having it set for different regions is going to help you a ton. And then one other one that they have maybe two other ones that would be pretty helpful. A precipitation radar, which I'm gonna be honest, I haven't used very much. I just use like a weather tracker, and go off of that rather than OnX. A big one though, and this could probably be pretty helpful, especially in recent years, is the smoke forecast for different areas, and whether or not you know a bunch of smoke in the air is gonna hurt your hunt, or if one area is clear and the other isn't, like maybe go to the clear area. But with this layer, you can actually see how thick the smoke is, where like this light gray, there's not a ton there, but there is a little bit of smoke in the air. Whereas if it gets really bad, especially up in Canada, you get these giant blotches of red and almost black. And that's something that you can use to your advantage as well. Just especially if you're going to have to travel to some of your spots.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And I've never seen either of those features, Bryce. That I think they're more so probably designed for Western hunting and or big game, but with a wind feature that can certainly play into our waterfowl hunting, because as we know, waterfowl are going to have to land into the wind. So kind of depending on your spot, if you're back in a little cove that you're going to need that northwest wind, and you're facing southeast, if that wind is completely backwards, that's not going to be the spot for you for that given day. So yeah. I think most of us that are waterfowl hunters, we are watching the weather constantly and always hoping for those ducky weather days and that good north wind. But yeah, it's a good thing that you can have basically preloaded for your different spots just to look out and see what's going to play best for you. You don't necessarily have to remember, exactly what wind you're going to need for a certain spot. So that's a really good tip. Another couple of things I was just going to mention, something that may be useful is setting radiuses on your waypoints. So me here down in the southeast, some of my private hunting spots, I have houses nearby. I have to make sure that for one, I'm legal. For two, I may need to make sure not to shoot in a certain direction, just so I'm not raiding houses. So you can actually set radiuses for your waypoints to make sure again, that you're within that or outside of that 100-yard legal rule. Or say if I want to set, a 300-yard radius around a certain house, just to make sure that I make sure I'm 300 yards or more from that house if I'm setting up in a cornfield, and make sure I'm not shooting in that direction. So that's kind of a nice another little tip that I use from time to time. Even on public land, maybe there's a bunch of houses or dwellings nearby a spot that I'm looking to hunt. That way I know where I can and cannot go to legally discharge my firearm. But the other one, which we're not really able to show on the computer, but works great on the mobile app, is the track feature, where it actually uses GPS on your phone. So again, if we're going to scout any of these spots, say, a Friday evening before we're going to hunt it on Saturday, so I take my boat in there and I know my path, know my spot, I got everything lined up. It's really nice to use that track feature where it'll actually show your track from wherever you start it, from wherever you end it. It'll actually do a GPS line, which makes it really nice on that following morning. I know I've used it out in North Dakota, just taking the four-wheeler through private lands, because again, what you see in the daytime is going to be totally different than what you're going to see that next morning at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock in the morning. So kind of a nice little feature to use.
Yeah, the tracking feature on the app is probably going to be your best friend no matter what. I was just using it today for rucking and pack training to just keep track of how far I'm going and how much elevation gain and change I have, and just being able to pull that up in the dark is really helpful, especially navigating it like at night. Getting out of a tree stand, or like with duck hunting especially, not knowing what an area looks like in the dark, it is super helpful to have. I thought there was a way to change this to the mobile version, but I think that's for developers, or otherwise I would show it.
Yeah,
Can you demonstrate the line feature while you have it up, Bryce? So say if you're looking at a spot, so like Bryce was talking earlier, where we picked out a parking spot, and
Yeah.
it's a little hard to determine how far that parking area is from where we're looking to hunt. So there's actually a feature on here where you can draw a line, whether it's a straight line or you want to zigzag, whichever route that you're may expect to take. You can actually map it out and see how far of a distance it may be. I like to use this because, like, if we're going to map this out and find out that it's going to be 900 yards or 3 miles, whatever it may be, that may determine of what you're looking to do as far as trekking in. So you can see as he's building it, we're already up to 650 yards. You know, it shows elevation drop, which is kind of nice. Again, kind of a more of a Western hunting feature, but you know, again, if you're hiking through woods, maybe perhaps where you're going up and over hills, you know, you're going to have some elevation drop and gain. You know, we're only 900 yards and we're what, like halfway there so far?
Not even. So
Not even, yeah.
yeah,
That's a couple mile walk in from that parking spot.
Yeah, and what's nice about this feature too is that, so if I can find a hill, you can actually see what part is the worst. So I know that there's a hill over here. So let's say we just want to go straight up the hill to out in the woods. This line will get progressively darker. So it'll go from green to red depending on intensity. And you can see that there's this little spike that goes to orange. And what you can do is if you drag this along, you can see what part of that trail spikes like this. And you can use that to kind of adjust where you want to go. Now, if you turn on the satellite view and look at the topo lines, this is the hybrid satellite view. So it'll give you topo lines on top of your satellite. What I usually do if I'm very concerned about just the terrain, I will just switch it to a normal topo map. And the rule is the tighter these lines are, the worse day you're going to have as far as hiking. Now, when it comes to duck hunting and things like that, it's not typically something that you're going to have to keep on the forefront of your mind as far as elevation gain and things like that. But like I said, if you're going into an area and you're carrying all of your stuff on your back, decoys, waders, I keep saying this because I did it to myself, it sucks. So this is something to check out if you're going to an area, especially in places like the Kettle Moraine, where a ridge looks flat until you get through the woods 50 yards and you realize that you are going up and over, or like down and up out of those kettles and following those ridge tops to a spot, and you didn't realize it was going to be that hard of a hike, and it's 2 a.m. and you're not happy. So this is something to keep in mind as you're looking at areas to check out, and and again, it's exactly why you need to go out and put boots on the ground when you're scouting. E-scouting again is more to help you get an idea of where to go and to keep you from aimlessly driving looking for signs like I did in high school looking for coyote spots. This is going to be your friend, but you do need to know the limitations of it as well.
Yeah, a lot of good points. Usually we're not dealing with a whole lot of up and down as far as waterfowl hunting. Usually we're flat land hunting waters or fields, but I know there are spots. I have hiked some spots where you gotta get back there a ways and you might have some elevation up and down as well. So yeah, it's a pretty good general overview, just kind of some workings of OnX, some good things to think about. I think we'll try to get into a little bit more nitty gritty about actual duck scouting. So if Quinn, you wanted to take over, you were more than welcome and kind of talk about kind of some more nitty gritty of actual finding ducks virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. So I should be sharing my screen, correct?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. What I have here is a general. I looked to make sure no one lives in Wood County before I did this, but what I have here is a couple different properties and places as far as a spot I've actually hunted, a spot I don't know why this one pin disappeared, so I'm going to add it real quick. But these purple pins that you're seeing, these are spots I had legitimately put eyes on ducks. I realized I was closing out a folder as everyone was talking, so I'm missing a couple pins, but That is what these purple pins are. Like visually put eyes on ducks, was there, no, there's ducks there. And the way I utilize that information is if we look at these two locations, I basically just try to replicate that. And this does a very good thing for me where it takes a huge area, this entire section here, and if you just find locations where you've seen ducks or you know ducks like to hang out and you just copy paste that in different areas, you can find areas where more ducks are likely to hang out. Just take off large tracts of land. So if we look at this pin here, we see, again, using super general information, we see a tree line, we see some green floating vegetation over water next to a large marsh. That is one area I saw ducks. This is another area I saw ducks. We see a tree line. We see some green floating vegetation next to a very large marsh. My other pin disappeared on me.
Okay, another thing that both of those spots, there was actually channels running right through there. It looked like channels or creeks or streams, whatever.
And this was the third location where I visually had eyes on ducks, right? And like Spencer just said, we have a tree line, large open marsh, and we do have some floating green vegetation in here and a channel, right? That is something I didn't even pick up on, but is entirely true. And so what I did was just look around this map and look for other areas that I said, hey, this represents the same thing. And so these yellow spots, I would say, are my B spots because they either have one of the three, two of the three, but they look very similar. So here we have a tree line, we have a body of water, but we don't have any of that green floating vegetation that was in the other spots. And now you'll also notice it is quite a further distance away from a channel like this. If I go to this yellow one, this has two of the three, right? We've got a tree line. We have some green floating vegetation, but if you look at it, it actually looks different. There's a little bit of a similar green floating vegetation back here, but it's not very similar. And then same back to this yellow one, right? We've got water, we've got a tree, we've got a channel, but we don't have a green floating vegetation. As opposed to these blue pins, which have got a tree line, green floating vegetation, and that channel, we're starting to see areas where these blue pins are what I would view as worth my time to try to make a point to get back there and scout them. Again, a lot of this virtual stuff is so that you can eventually end up on the ground there. This one to me is probably my number one out of all of them that I was looking at. You have a lot of water, a lot of floating vegetation, and a very big tree line here. I should add for this species of ducks that we primarily killed on the hunt when I was hunting right here, it was wood ducks, right? Wood ducks, called wood ducks because they like trees. They like the acorns that fall out of them. So that's where I think these tree lines really came into play. Again here, channel, green floating vegetation, and a wood line. The other things that you can do sometimes, not all of the time, virtually, is figure out where you're going to hide. I know some aspects of this were touched on, but this one you might almost be able to sit in the tree line. Again, using OnX and this line feature, if I think that there are ducks sitting in this pond and I think I'm going to sit into these trees, I can see, hey, how reasonable is it for me to shoot all the way across that pond? Oh, 45 yards, that's pretty far. But with this little water opening, we're talking about 25 yards. I can say, oh, I'm gonna see if I get to this pond, well, this tree line might be a spot I can actually set up. Some other features that is not available on the base package, but I really like. I have the all 50 states. It's $100 a year. It allows you these three other tools down here, namely this leaf off imagery if you're just looking for water, this leaf off imagery is a fantastic tool. It takes all the leaves off the trees. It's winter pictures. Obviously, water becomes significantly easier to identify when you don't have to battle with a bunch of green, right? The other thing that I like about this leaf off imagery is because it gives me two different points of view. So, for example, I'm gonna go back to the regular view. If we zoom in here, we could say, "Oh, that's water, right? There's a ton of water here." I'm gonna walk this point specifically a good distance in. I can tell you this blue line right here is a half mile. So I'm walking 3/4 of a mile across marsh, across everything to come hunt this pond, or even just to scout it. Meanwhile, if I turn on leaf off imagery, you can see that, oh, there's no water here, right? Oh, this image was likely taken during a flooding event of some sort, either in the spring, during the summer, when all the leaves are on the trees, right? And if we're hitting low water conditions, we haven't gotten rain in a while, this spot might not be viable at all. There might be no water there. We might be dealing with tall grass. These can be honey holes if you can find them when they're flooded, but the ducks have to find them first. And again, as you're panning through, you can just see, especially for walking in, right? This is that first spot or one of the spots I showed. And these images look wildly different for leaf on versus leaf off, right? Leaf on imagery, you might foolishly think, oh, all I have to do is cross this creek, and then I might be able to wear some waders and get to this hunting spot, but I should be able to get there. Leaf off imagery is telling you a completely different story. You are seeing a ton of water with no floating vegetation on it, which is what it ends up, this vegetation is, right? It is floating because it's moving around and being pushed. And you are likely going to need at least a kayak. You're not walking in there anymore, based on what I'm seeing. All from the comfort of my house, I'm finding out this information. So if I do want to hunt here, I know I'm going to need another plan. Also, if my initial plan was to, sit off of this brief point right here, you should probably sit off this one, but this brief point right here, if I show up there, this might look completely different, right? What I was expecting is not what I saw there. A lot of times when you're duck hunting, it's 4 a.m. And if you're going in there blind, now you are completely different set of circumstances. That water you thought you were going to kayak into or hunt is not there. So that is a lot of the tools I use. Again, very big for me to just say, what's here? What am I looking at? Where do I know ducks are? Again, floating green vegetation, tree line, channel running through. Where can I replicate that? Animals like what they like. Ducks can fly. So while this hike here or this hike here or wherever might seem terrible to you, it's really easy for them. And so finding areas that replicate that is extremely useful. Again, unfortunately, this tool is a upgrade to OnX. I really wish I got a commission based on the OnX subscriptions I sold because I have more money than I do. But this is just a tool, to me, is very worth it. They also have the recent imagery. These are a lot lower quality images, but you can page through them and it is showing you what is happening between these dates, right? So early April, that's a pretty good rain time. So here you can see there's no vegetation. It hasn't all sprung up. We probably got a lot of water. And so you're seeing the full maximum amount of water that's held in this area. If we go back a little bit more to January, you can see there's ice here, right? Ice and snow covering all this. This also can be useful. It takes a while, but if you're planning a late November, early December hunt, and if we look at, I'm actually going to pan over to the area Bryce was looking at previously. I know it's over here somewhere. If we're looking at somewhere we want to hunt, but we're worried about ice up, this potentially has the ability to show you, hey, there's no ice on this, right? Here we've got ice in the rest of the marsh versus this area. I actually believe this is a shadow. So let me stop looking like a fool. But it can be a tool to help you identify those areas that are going to stay open longer, right? Here we've got November 10th through 24th. And then we have November 24th through December 8th. We've got ice on all the lakes now, on all the bodies of water. And you can take the time to pan through all of these and say, oh, where is there open water?
This is really nice to use because this is a 2-week window, as you can see, just as Quinn is going back in time. So again, not super detailed, but you can kind of get a good general picture. Like obviously he was showing like in April, we know the state got crazy amounts of water back in April. So say you're looking at another state or another part of Wisconsin that you're looking to hunt where you can actually look at recent imagery. Like this isn't several months ago, this is in the last 2 weeks, which is kind of nice.
And so this is probably the best example. I had to go to the main river channel to find it, but ducks are probably there as well, right? This is Lake Dubé right up here, and ice versus water, right? It becomes extremely prevalent in this image. And so you're kind of seeing, oh, ducks need water. They're called waterfowl. They're probably now consolidated down into the river system. And again, we look further down into the river system. Some of it is frozen up, some of it's open. Again, being able to do all of this at your house when you don't have to deal with conditions where water, like if it's cold enough for water to freeze, right? It's just another tool that you have at your availability if you choose to pay for it. These are just little things that I try to do. I forget about them all of the time. Spending more time playing in here. The more you use any tool, the better you're going to be at it. The other thing I was going to talk about, Spencer, did anybody talk about the crop layers?
Bryce briefly kind of covered it, but if you want to dive in a little deeper there.
Yeah. So I am not a field hunter by any means, but I do this for deer. OnX does have features where they show you crop distribution in this trees, crops, and soil layer. And from here, you can choose what type of crop you'd like to see, right? Peanuts, not really prevalent up in Wisconsin. If you hunt in a different state, you travel somewhere else. That's where a lot of these come into play. The way I like to utilize this when I'm planning, you're going to see it's Wisconsin. There's a lot of corn. That's why I chose this filter. Is you're going to start to see bands almost form. If I zoom in here, it really blows up, right? You can see how much corn gets planted. But where it's useful is if we go more towards the driftless, a little bit hilly, you're seeing here's where all of the corn is planted, right? It's not in this area. These geese are probably landing in this band if they're eating on corn at that time of year. This can also be super useful for isolated pockets like this. We've got, there's even more as it pops up as I zoom in. The point stands. Figuring out what they're feeding on, finding fields that way. Obviously, it's really easy to find cornfields and agricultural fields on a map. Figuring out where bands are, where they might migrate through, where they might travel through, and comparing that to water, right? This is a huge lake, huge reservoir. It's going to hold a lot of waterfowl. If they want to go to a feed, they don't want to spend as much energy as possible. They might hop over to this very large feed, right? This is a cornfield. This is one area that I might check out. I might definitely go take a look at it. This is something great you can do during the summer for waterfowl hunting, is either marking areas that are of interest to you or getting in your car, driving around and confirming these. Because certain crops are preferenced by waterfowl versus others, different times of year and things like that. And making sure that this cornfield that's marked is actually cornfield, trying to get access to it come the fall, can be a great way to get ahead of the curve, as opposed to the rest of the people like myself that wait till 2 weeks before duck opener.
Yeah, really good point there, Quinn, that just talking about the ag fields, most of that will likely be private land. So obviously you won't have access unless you gain permission from the landowner. There are occasional times where you'll find that on public land or that VPA or voluntary public access properties. I know typically are often ag fields. There could be some public access out there with agriculture. So just know that that could be an option for you.
That was just the quick little blip that I had, Spencer.
Yeah, one thing, just looking at your map that I wanted to mention too. So Quinn was kind of talking about some of those yellow points, that where it hit several of the things that we're looking for to help locate waterfowl. I know one of the things he mentioned that was one of those spots was a little bit farther back. This could be both good and bad for you. Maybe it doesn't hit all those points. It doesn't look like the best spot, but potentially that could mean that no one else has accessed that spot just because it's a farther walk in. So that could be good for you. It can also suck for you because that's a little farther back and it's going to be a little bit harder to get to. So just kind of something to keep in mind there. So again, really good to have backups on your backups, just to have different places scouted virtually, so that way you can pivot as need be when you're ready to hunt.
Yeah, and this point actually is a good example of something that both is difficult to get to, can be difficult to get to, but if you get boots on the ground or spend some more time on the map, you might actually notice there is a trail cut right through all of these trees. Again, I did not notice this the first time I looked at it. I was sitting here thinking like, oh, if I were to walk back here, what would I rather do? Drag a kayak, cross here to paddle up, paddle all the way from this road down here. But you might actually be able to walk in closer. I don't know if you could drive a car all the way down this, if it's open for that, but you're probably at the very least able to walk it. And from this point here, or one of these back here, you might be able to cut through trees and or openings to be able to get back here. So again, another set of planning where if you were driving on the road and saw a bunch of ducks back here, you'd probably think, oh, I've got to park here and walk 3/4 of a mile back in. Using technology, everything you can see online, oh, I have a way easier path all the way back than I previously thought. So just...
Yeah, it's a good eagle eye there, Quinn, for seeing that path. Because for me, I like to cross-reference because, okay, I'm going to find out what property this is and see if there's another map that actually might lay out that trail. Just to find those backdoor access points is really nice to have. So,
and you could see the leaf off imagery, almost maybe, I'm not entirely sure, revealed another path through here. You can see this. Oh, look, maybe it was an old forestry road or is one that continues off of here. And so you're even able to get closer on an actual trail. So it's just utilizing all of your tools, all of your frames of reference that you have. I don't know if anybody talked on LiDAR. It's not exactly applicable for waterfowl, but this is basically extremely detailed topographic mapping. You can see the slight hillsides here. It is a pretty good way to identify water, right? Because anywhere that there's land, you're going to have a little bit of a texture on it, as opposed to water. It shows back up completely flat. Even here, this would appear to me to be a little bit of a high spot in this marsh right here. So if you're talking about finding a place to hunt or to set up, to place a blind or anything like that, here you have a little bit a little bit of a high spot to set up on. The leaf off imagery, I could see there's a question on there as far as finding it. So the two issues with that, it should be in this bottom right corner, the same place that you are changing from satellite to hybrid to topo. There should be leaf off imagery there. If it isn't there, there's two options. This is only available for the OnX Elite, so the most expensive membership. I apologize for that. The other thing with it is sometimes an app has to get updated. You might have to scroll to find this. I promise you it is on my phone. I can see it, but that is sometimes where it'll pop up if you don't have that Elite option. It'll be locked. They might just flat out hide it at this point. So that's where I've got with that. I'm lucky and I use Elite and travel all 50 states. Got pins all over the place. If you travel out of state, just buy Elite. It's worth it. It's worth it. But with that, I could probably stop before I get even deeper into OnX and everything.
Yeah, a lot of good points, Quinn. I only had a couple more slides to share. I don't know if some good questions so far, so I appreciate you guys asking questions. When to scout? I would argue that virtual scouting, you can do it anytime and you should do it 12 months a year. You can always add more spots, more access points, more private land to get permission on, wherever it may be. Scouting in person will kind of depend. If you're going to go scout a marsh like Quinn was showing, in January where it's frozen up, are there going to be birds there? Probably not. Will there be birds there here in July? Maybe. Depends on what the water is. Will there be birds there in November when you want to hunt it? Again, you'll have to go and look. So, different water conditions will vary, different weather conditions, different types of habitat, will kind of vary as well. So, one thing I mentioned earlier, OnX is not always 100%. They get a lot of our data from the states, just as far as state land and things like that. So what you see on OnX is not always 100% correct. What you see as far as signage actually on the property will almost always be correct. So make sure you follow those over what you see on your phone with OnX. So another good thing just to make a plan, like Quinn was mentioning, you're scouting, finding these spots, get your boots on the ground, go out and scout, and then have your backups. So like I talked earlier, just track your route in and out. It can be very helpful just to help find that spot early in the morning. So one thing that I kind of do, say if I'm going to go out on Friday evening, sometimes I'll bring my shotgun, not with the intent to actually shoot any birds, but if I'm going to be there out in the marsh, I might as well have my gun with me. So I kind of consider that as a scout hunt, if you will. So my main focus is to kind of scout for the morning, but maybe I'll throw a couple decoys out and just be prepared in case the opportunity presents itself. So just be cautious. You don't want to burn that spot for the following morning, especially if you're looking at roosts. Typically what you're going to be seeing in the evening time. So just be aware of that. But
Spencer, I'll just comment in terms of what I would look for again, and it depends on what time of the year. So again, early, pre-hunting season, right now I'd be looking for food. You're going to be looking for, is it moist soils? Are you looking for wild rice? Are you looking where we have, in terms of us as properties, are we managing for those moist soil seeds? Are we're wood ducks? Find some big white oaks that are, hanging over some of the water areas. But then having, a backup plan for say October, November, I'm going to be looking for places for birds to get away. They're not necessarily so much focused on food at that point as much as, hey, this is a spot that I want to not be shot at. And so again, tends to be what you want to focus on a little bit more. I will comment that we as a DNR, we've done several surveys and studies and we've looked at it, asking people what their typical behavior is and how that's resulted in hunting. And we have seen that people who scout 3 or more times a year harvest on average 3 times as many birds as people who don't scout at all. And so again, the entire point of your guys being here tonight is, yeah, just do this. And again, the first scouting thing, it doesn't even have to be so much scouting as more or less making sure that your boat runs, because quite honestly, there's a lot of people that show up on, opening day that haven't run their boat since last November. And if your one scouting day, make sure that all your equipment is functioning and your decoys aren't all tangled in the bottom of your decoy. That's a good day. That's well worth at least one of your days to go out and scout. So again, I think just making sure that you have a plan and an objective for that scouting. Is it hey, I want to see as many birds as possible, or do I just want to make sure that my boat's functioning and my dog's doing fine in the boat, or I'm not leaking in my boat, or my pump works, those types of things. I can't emphasize enough that it doesn't have to be, hey, I need to see, a flock of 200 ducks and that's going to be a good scouting mission. It could just be, hey, I want to shoot my 3 wood ducks and that's a good day for me. That, again, just depending on what your objectives are.
Yeah, very good point. That finding ducks is obviously important, but if, like Taylor said, if your boat's not running, you can't even get to the ducks, then you're kind of SOL. So, yep, every little bit of prep definitely will play into you having more success in the fall. So, whether it be practice shooting, like Taylor mentioned, having your dog ready, getting your gear ready, things like that. So. No, it just kind of plays into the ethics we were talking about earlier, just to make sure that you were doing the best you can as far as being an ethical hunter. And I mentioned earlier today, everyone in attendance tonight will get a free admission to the Waterfowl Hunters Expo in Oshkosh. That is August 21st and 22nd. If you're interested in any little bit about waterfowl, I would highly encourage you to attend. That is a Friday, Saturday. It has all kinds of different seminars. There's cooking, decoys, calls, boats, blinds, you name it, anything and everything to do with waterfowl. It is family friendly. You can bring your dog, bring your kids. It's a great expo. Just want to put a little shout out for next couple upcoming Waterfowl Wednesdays. We will do an intro to decoy setup July 22nd at Daniel Boone Conservation League. So keep an eye out for that. If you want to learn more about decoys, that is in person. And then we will do one final virtual Waterfowl Wednesday with duck identification and regulations with some of our conservation wardens. That will be August 19th. So if you want to learn more about any of those topics, feel free to sign up. Same place where you found the sign up for tonight. And then again, if you haven't already, please make sure you put your name into the chat. That's how I'm taking attendance, and that's how you will get your expo tickets. If you didn't sign into the chat, then I won't count you for attendance. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. I hope you learned a little something. I'll hang around for a bit and answer any questions. Feel free to unmute yourself or throw it in the chat, but that is all I have for tonight. Thanks.